Okay, I have spent my whole life in the Aurora area, North Aurora. I entered kindergarten at an early age. Nowadays, you wouldn't be able to enter as young as I was, so I was always one of the youngest in my class. And after going to kindergarten, I went to a Catholic grade school for 8 years, which you didn't really see how things were in the world with going to the Catholic school. After that, I didn't want to go to the military Catholic high school, so I went to regular public school, and it was a big awakening for me because we had people of all, I'll say, races and stuff. In the Catholic school I went to, it was 100% white kids, so it was a little different, and I was not very concerned about grades in school. I did graduate from high school, but I have a couple of good friends that they always say that out of 380 kids in our class, we were number 378, 379, 380. So I just wasn't very wanting to really do much. But I did graduate, and I was 17 when I graduated, and as I was looking for jobs, most places you had to be 18. I wasn't going to be 18 for about another 6 to 7 months. So I finally was hired by Sears to be a salesman, and I had been there for 2 years when I received the nice letter from the President of the United States, which I have with me here today, telling me I was invited to join the military. So this was in August of 1967. I had graduated in 1965. So I was not the happiest person at the time, but I think I received the letter on something like August 5th, and I had a report on the August 22nd, so they didn't give us much notice. So on the morning of the 22nd, my parents and girlfriend took me up to the draft board in St. Charles, where we boarded buses, were hauled into Chicago to the induction center, and that's how my military service began. At the time, the Vietnam War was on the news all the time. So you pretty much knew if you were drafted where you were going to go. At the time, they did not have draft numbers yet. So I'm not sure how the draft board picked and chose, who they were going to take, but I was one of the lucky ones. I was taken. So I was pretty apprehensive about it. Not sure what it was going to be like, but just felt it was my obligation to go and do it. And I received my orders to go to Fort Polk, Louisiana for infantry training. And at that time, when we graduated there, the handwriting was on the wall where we were going to go. So I received my orders for Vietnam, and we were given a 30-day leave to go home and, whatever. And I had to report to Oakland, California then, which I flew out to Los Angeles, and then a connecting flight up to Oakland, to the Oakland Army Terminal. And after sitting around for something like 3 days, we were flown to Vietnam. We flew into Benoit Air Force or Air Base, and pretty much everybody I talked to says the same thing. As we landed coming down the runway, we're looking out the windows, and both sides there's bunkers, machine gun nests and everything guarding the airstrip. which you're right, immediately starting to see what's going on over there. And then after the plane landed and taxied and they open up the two doors, the inside of the airplane was instantly permeated with three things: the heat, the humidity, and the stench. And again, pretty much everybody agrees on that. We got out, we're taken by buses over to whatever center. The next morning, as we're in line at the mess hall for breakfast, I'm watching Huey gunships outside, right outside of where we were, firing at whatever they were firing at. So we were instantly, seeing, war over there. And then at the time, we didn't have our actual assignments yet, so each day everybody would be going out, and there were hundreds of people coming in continually, and they would start reading off so many names for this division, and it might have been, I can't remember for sure, the second or third day I was there, my name was called off with like 40 or 50 other names, going to the 101st Airborne Division. And I kind of raised my hand. I'm not airborne qualified, but that's where you're going. And it turned out, anyhow, this was, I arrived over there on March 6th of 1968. And the 101st had gone over in December of 67 as a full 100% airborne qualified division. This was like 2.5 months later, and they had taken casualties at such a high rate they couldn't put them through jump school fast enough. So they were taking non-airborne people because they were not doing any airborne jumps anyhow. And I was assigned to second platoon, introduced to my squad leader, who was Sergeant Halliburton, and I was, my position was put on a M60 machine gun team. 3 members of the team: the gunner, the assistant gunner, and the ammo bearer. And I started out at the low end as the ammo bearer. I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but when I was in infantry training, we qualified on the M16 rifle and the M60 machine gun. And in our infantry training company, there were 200 of us, 10 people, including myself, and qualified expert on the M60 machine gun. So that was 5%. So right away, I was on an M60 machine gun team, plus carrying my M16. I carried 30 magazines, 600 rounds for my M16. Plus, I carried another 300 or 400 rounds for the M60. Everything else you can possibly think of: multiple grenades, 3 canteens of water, C rations, first aid, personal stuff. So we were carrying well over 100 pounds of everything you can think of. Each platoon would send out 1 squad on what was called a night ambush. So that way the company was like in 4 different areas, more chance of making contact with the enemy. As luck would have it, it was my squad's turn. So not only was it my first night out there, I was in a much smaller group of people. So I was, pretty scared. And Sergeant Halliburton asked me, how to run the radio? I said, yeah. Okay, good. You're my radio man tonight. So I gave my ammo for the 60s to somebody else to carry. And fortunately, nothing happened that night. April 9th, we had our daily, it was called our daily stand down. If we weren't actually engaged with the enemy in the afternoon, we would have a stand down where we'd have a rest. We would have resupply, supplies flown out to us, replacements flown out to us. If we were lucky, we would get a hot meal in there, because most of the time we were just eating sea rations 3 times a day. And then after we had our stand down, our squad again was left behind as they moved out, and after darkness we were supposed to go out, set up a night ambush. By that time I had moved up to assistant gunner. Pop Scales, who had been our gunner, he moved up to fire team leader. Barry moved up to gunner. And somewhere in that time, Doug Thompson came in as ammo bearer. So while we were waiting for darkness, Barry had gotten a funny birthday card in the mail that day. And he wanted to show it to somebody on a different position. So instead of lugging the M60 with him, he took my M16 and left the M60 with me. And he had just been gone a short period of time when the shit hit the fan. They opened up on us. Doug and I were basically shoulder to shoulder. He got shot right through the heart. Like I said earlier, we weren't supposed to make friends, but Doug and I had become friends. He was a black guy from Fayetteville, North Carolina. We only known each other a short period of time, but we had dug bunkers together, foxholes, done everything together, and become friends. So he was killed instantly. Pop Scales got shot in the side. That left me, and I grabbed the M60 to start to return fire. And I fired 1 round. I recocked it, fired 1 round, did that 5 times. So I picked up Doug's 16, started to return fire with that, and eventually we drove them off. Years later, when I saw the movie Forrest Gump, and Gump's best friend was Bubba, and he was killed, and Forrest carried him out of there, it reminded me so much of carrying Doug out of there. Doug is the first name on line 6 of panel 49E on the wall, and I'll never forget the guy. And then that was on the night of April 9th. On the night of April 11th, 2 nights later, monsoon season had started, and our company had been losing people fairly quickly. So our whole platoon was sent out on a night ambush, 25 guys. Our platoon was down to 25 people. Like I say, it was monsoon season, so we went out to the area we were supposed to go to. We set up for the night in one of those elliptical shaped grave sites with a wall about 15, 18 inches high around it. And like I say, it was raining like crazy. We couldn't see our hand in front of our face. And about 1 o'clock or so in the morning, we were attacked. Even though we couldn't see anything, our enemy knew right where everything was. They disabled our trip flares, they disabled our claymore mines, and they moved right in on top of us. They started lobbing in satchel charges, which I was wounded by. And by the time we got done that night, out of 25 guys, we had 5 that were not killed or wounded. They pretty much wiped us out. I can remember a lot of what happened to different people that night. And we radioed for help. Nobody could help us. We just had to make do with what we had. Our medic had both of his legs shattered by an explosion, so he couldn't help anybody. Our platoon leader, lieutenant, was shot through the stomach. After things died down, I tried bandaging him up. Larry Odom lost a thumb. Fuentes was blinded. It was just went on and on and on with what happened to people that night. And we had to wait till the next morning. And when they finally got out there, sent help out to us. They'd bring in helicopters, medevacs to start taking the wounded out. And our first sergeant had come out, and he was getting people organized in an area for the medevacs to pick up, and I'm standing there, and he said to me, "Are you one of the wounded?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Why don't you sit down?" I said, "I can't." I had the seat of my pants blown out, and so there's some humor in this, but it wasn't too humorous at the time. I ended up being in the hospital almost a month and a half. Even though my wounds weren't that serious, my eardrum had gotten infected, and that kept me in the hospital. So eventually I was released from the hospital and transferred back up north to my unit. Went back to be an assistant gunner on the machine gun team. And I think it was only 10 days I was out there when I was wounded the second time. During that time, when I went back out there, I was just scared to death of nighttime because of what had been happening at nighttime. Our company got involved in a firefight, and our fire team with the machine gun, we were set up in a trench that they had dug, but we were using it for cover. And so we were kind of like in this one tree line, and the enemies in another tree line were firing back and forth. And I saw a flash in the other tree line, and the flash was one of them firing an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, at our position. And the guy had perfect aim. He dropped it right into the trench we were put in. And there was 3 guys there with me who were all wounded by it. And one of the guys who was then the 3rd guy on the machine gun team, ammo bearer, it seems like he had stepped between the explosion and me just as it happened, not intentionally, just in people moving around. And I remember him hurt real bad. Starkey was the gunner. Another guy with M79. I helped get all 3 of them medevaced out of there. And after the medevac was gone, Whitey, one of the other guys in the squad with me, he told me I was bleeding from the neck. And I didn't even know it with the excitement, whatever. And so I went and reported to my squad leader, Sergeant Halliburton, had been wounded and was not with us anymore, had somebody different for squad leader. And he said, well, how bad are you? He says, we're really short-handed. We've lost so many people. Do you think you could make it through the night? I said, yeah, I think so. Well, as nighttime came, it started hurting. And so finally the next morning, I was medevaced in. I remember not a doctor, but some medic with a probe digging in my neck trying to find this piece of shrapnel, and they eventually decided just to leave it in there, so it's still in my neck. Sent back out, and when I got out there that time, I told them I wanted off the machine gun because we were always the prime target, and somehow they went with that. So I was made demolition man for my platoon. So I carried a lot of C4, blasting caps, fuse cord, det cord, and basically would just blow up unexploded ordnance, bunkers, stuff like that. And it was kind of, it seemed like for a while there was kind of a quiet time. We weren't having a lot of fighting going on. Because this was 1968, which was our worst year, the highest amount of casualties over there. And so it was about a month and a half or so that we had been out there, and our platoon radioman had to go in for, like, I can't remember if it was his tonsils or appendix, something like that, for some medical thing. So the platoon leader had asked him, well, who should take over your spot? And, well, have Davidson do it, because I was always one of the backup radiomen. So I gave up my demolition, which I must say was fun. I got a big bang out of it. And took over as radioman for our platoon leader, and who was First Lieutenant Earl Zahler. He was from Chicago. So that was on July 20th. The next day, we started to, we were always on these search and destroy missions. The next day, we started to go right back through a village. The previous day, we had gone through it one direction, stayed out there overnight. Next day, started going right back through it the other direction. And for the first time, we had tanks working with us. And as we were going through the village, they were in the dry rice paddy. And after a while, one of the tank commanders got a hold of us and thought he saw a booby trap, so Lieutenant Zahler and I went over and took a look at it, decided it wasn't a booby trap. So, okay, I started moving out. And also, for the first time, we had a scout dog working with us. It was July 21st, 100 and whatever degrees. The dog handler numerous times had me radio in that the dog was being totally ineffective because of the heat. Dog's tongue was dragging on the ground, but the Army, no, keep it out there. So I started walking over, catching up with them, and the scout dog walked through the tripwire on a booby-trap grenade. The dog, caught the wire, kept moving, the dog handler, and then me, and then the grenade went off about 5 to 6 feet to my left rear, and it got me pretty much from top to bottom. The dog handler got a couple pieces in the back of one of his legs. There was an Army photographer behind me, got hit in the arm. I took the majority of it. And then as it turned out, we didn't have our platoon medic. He was in for some reason. So our company headquarters unit was a ways behind us, and we had to wait for our senior medic to catch up with us. In the meantime, they were trying to radio me because they heard the explosion. I'm trying to, half conscious, find the handset to return. But anyhow, our senior medic got up there, and other guys had already started, trying to do something. And then it turned out, because of the tanks, the medic had put all of his equipment, including his stretcher, on one of the tanks that was out in the rice paddy. So he attended to me best he could with what he had, and he was much, much smaller than me. I'm a fairly big person. So he was this little black guy, and in the meantime, a regular Huey, not a medevac, but just a regular slick, had landed out in the rice paddy. And he picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, fireman style, all by himself, no help, and starts racing out there. He fell down twice, got up again. I give the guy huge amounts of credit for what he did. By this time, the other two guys that were hit and the dog were in the medevac, or not the medevac, the Huey. They flew us back to LZ Sally, where we had a small underground first aid center, just very basic, where they cut off my clothes, started an IV, put me on a stretcher, put me on a medevac to fly me down to the 22nd Surgical Hospital again. And as luck would have it, I had the same medic who said the same thing. You're not going to have hair on your ass when I get done with you. And I went into surgery. From the time I was hit till the time I was in surgery was about an hour and a half. They really moved over there when people were badly wounded. And eventually was being sent back after the third time back to my infantry company. We had heard after 3 times, you don't go back to the fighting, but I was sent back to my infantry company. And I got back up to LZ Sally and then put on a supply truck. One of our company was having a stand down at one of our forward fire support bases. And I rode out there, and again, I was not happy that I was going back out there again. So we got out to the fire support base. As I'm jumping down off the truck, somebody yelled at me. The first sergeant wanted to see me. I thought, well, that's not good news. But I reported to him, and he said our company had just gotten orders to send one guy into a new helicopter unit to be door gunner. He said, I'm going to send you. He says, it's not because I like you. It's not because you've been wounded 3 times, but just get the hell out of here, get back on the truck, and go back to Sally. So when I went to the helicopter unit, I was a Spec 4, and started flying pretty regular. And at first we were just in the Army tents, and eventually they started building us the more permanent hooches that they had over there. But eventually we got in a Sergeant First Class E-7 as our aviation platoon leader, and him and I were bunking right next to each other. And he was a nice guy, and we're getting to know each other and stuff. And so I started bugging him for a promotion up to sergeant. No, he says, you're a door gunner. All you can ever be is a Spec 4. I'd bug him. Yeah, we finally let it go. And so I started flying pretty much almost every day. In fact, I have my flight records with me, which shows the daily flying, the amount of hours, that type of thing. And a couple months later, about the end of December, I had been flying pretty much every day. And Sergeant Rubright one day says, you're not flying today. And why? Don't question me why. You're not flying today. Oh, okay. A little while later, you look like shit. Go put some clean fatigues on. Why? Who cares? You heard me. Okay. So later that morning, they call a company headquarters formation, and we're all up there. And oh, is this what he wanted me for? Well, they finally start handing out promotions, and I got my promotion to sergeant. I turned around and looked at him. He's just got a shit-eating grin on his face, because even though he kept telling me no, he had gone ahead and done it anyhow, retroactive back to November 11th. So I had gone into the Army August 22nd, so less than 15 months, I went up to sergeant. Our time in country was 365 days. I arrived March 6th, so my day to leave, my deroast date was March 5th. And 4 weeks to the day prior to me leaving, one of our other helicopters was shot down. I'm just going to make this brief. It could go on forever. The helicopter I was on was sent out to find them, and I retrieved the 4 remains of these guys I flew with. And that night, my CO, who was working hand to hand with me, I made a just off-the-wall comment. I didn't want to fly anymore. And the next morning, he relieved 3 of us that were all deroasting at the same time that were in the helicopter unit. He said, "You 3 guys have done enough." He could have just said, "Sergeant, you're in the Army, you got a job to do." But he didn't. He was affected by it. So anyhow, you're happy as can be. I had my short timer stick. I had short embroidered on the back of my boonie cap, knowing that I was going home. What a relief it was. And eventually got taken down to, back down to Tonsanute Airfield, and we were supposed to leave actually a night early. They had us out to the airfield, and then plane didn't come in. So we were taken back, had to wait another day, and we're thinking, okay, this is the night we get mortared here or something. So anyhow, the next morning, they got us in 2 lines, and I was number 1 for the back door, and the guy that was number 1 for the front door, we're racing to see who can get in that plane first. And it was a total different experience. Like I said, on the way over, the stewardess were having pillow fights. It was all types of. On the way back, everybody's just, very different experience. We flew up to Japan, where it was wintertime, snow on the ground. We had on our jungle fatigues. We had to get off the plane while they refueled it. Coldest I've ever been in my life. And then we flew from Japan to Oakland. And I had orders to go to Fort Eustis, Virginia, which was an Army transportation school. My MOS was infantry. So I got there, and I'd never heard of it before. I was sent on an interview with a first sergeant. In the military, you get orders. I was sent on an interview, and he liked me. He chose me. I was part of the cadre at an instant NCO school for the rest of my time there. And on August 21st, got out of the Army. So it's something I wish I wouldn't have had to do, but glad I did. I eventually used the GI Bill to go through college, and that's what I tell people in Julia's class. If you can't afford college, go into the military and you'll get your college paid for. So that was something I was very, very thankful for. I'm proud of what I did. I do belong to a PTSD group. Nobody should be ashamed of it. There's 12 of us in our group, and we're closer than family. We we are, you know, totally there for each other. In fact, when I leave here today, he's not a member of our group, but one of our bigger groups, he's in the hospital right now. I'm going to go visit him because I feel so close to him. So there's a real camaraderie. And I learned, you know, in the military that, you know, we had talked about it earlier. It doesn't make any difference who you are, where you're from, what color you are, what religion you are. We all work together.